So it is my honor to introduce Dr. Valentine Gandhi, who probably some of you already know already. As you can see from his very brief bio paragraph on the screen, he has a lot to offer in terms of thinking about AI. I thought one of the nicest things that when we had our intro call with him, one of the nicest, well, two of the nicest things. One is that he is from Asia himself and spends a considerable amount of time here. And so that was one of the primary reasons we wanted to bring Val in, because he understands the context in which many of us live and work. And it would be interesting to hear from his perspective. But the other part of it is Val is not just an evaluator, but he's also someone who understands IT. And I thought that was a fantastic combination because he's someone who understands both worlds and he brings that to the table. So, in summary, and I'm not going to read all of this because I'm sure by now you've already read all of it, but he's a senior evaluator and policy advisor and has, wow, over 24 years of experience designing and implementing programs and evaluations. He is the founder of the Development Cafe, which I'm sure many of us have heard about. He also hosts the EES's Eval Edge podcast. Uh, we will be hearing from Val for about 20 minutes today. The topics were actually advertised when Barbara sent out the invite, but you will hear from him today for about 20 minutes. And then we hope to have time left over for Q&A and for a more interactive conversation with Val. So hold on to those questions or feel free to post them in chat. Barbara will be helping us compile the questions, and then we will have a chance to have you voice them over and make this session much more interactive than it currently is. I think with that, I will stop talking because you're not here to hear me, and I will turn it over to Val. Val, over to you. Look forward to hearing you.
Thank you very much for that introduction. I hope you're able to see my screen. If not, kindly let me know. And can you hear me okay?
We see your screen and we can also hear you.
All right. Let me see. Slideshow. All right. So thank you for that kind introduction. I'm Val, and I have been part of MERL Tech since its inception in many ways because the founder is a dear friend and with NLP Community of Practice. And so when they talked to me about launching the Asia Community of Practice, I was immediately keen to jump on board to support because this is of interest personally to me, both professionally as well as a personal mission to connecting technologies with the development sector. A little bit on Dev Cafe. Some of you probably have heard of it. It was founded in 2001 because I was a master's student when I founded it. It was 25 years ago. And then at the time, I started my career in cybersecurity as an ethical hacker and also as a software programmer. And then I decided to switch my careers to international development. And at the time, I found there was a huge divide between what we can do in technology and what actually happens in the public sector or development sector. And since then, we have had like 7 country offices and around the world. The headquarters is in Nairobi. It partners with NGOs and private sector. Again, it's 70% self-funded. So if you want to partner, if you have ideas, DevCafe is able to support your work a little bit. We do a little bit of consulting work for governments and NGOs if it's in line with our mission to connect grassroots with policy. So we are basically a tech and research NGO, but we do our own thing because we try not to be guided by donor money or government money, but rather what the grassroots realities are. So we're very much happy to be partnering with MERL Tech on this NLP CoP launch. Today's discussion on AI for MERL, it can be a complex topic, so I'm going to try to keep it as simple as possible with 3 different experiences. One is I did extensive research on AI for Mel, being the tech person as well as a Mel person. So I presented a paper on responsible AI with UNU Macau AI Summit recently. And then along with 2 of my other senior colleagues, I've been working on a book published by Routledge and about to be funded by Conrad Foundation on AI in evaluation, So we collected about 34 chapters from who's who of evaluation and technology, and it's about to be published. And that's the second work. And then third is Dev Cafe runs a AI email course on AI for evaluation. Again, I'm not promoting it. It's really subsidized course, but what the idea is to build capacity. So these three experiences gave me some idea on how can we actually realistically apply AI for MERL. To get into AI, we first need to understand how digital development has evolved. At least I've seen it evolve in my little lifetime and experience. In the 90s, incidentally, in India was when tech was started to be used in the public sector for elections in Calcutta, managing elections. And that time it was called ICT 4D. Even now, some folks call it ICT 4D, which is using existing tools for use in the public sector or development sector. We didn't really design tools for development, but used existing ones, whether it's computers or so on. And then early 2018, it became digital development, where we started designing tools specifically for for the development sector, whether it's on open data, mobile money, mHealth platforms, data collection, and so on. And then in the last 5 years or 6 years or so, we've realized that we are no longer, this is not something, we are living in a digital world. So there are many strategies from US government, UK government, and EU coming up with this concept of doing development in digital world. So it's not really a tool, but rather we are operating within the context. Everything is digital. And now we are in this AI for good world where Gen AI suddenly appeared last year or a year ago. It's been there in different forms as data science and statistics and big data and so on. But now with the use of AI, everybody is into AI and MERL and so on. So next would be agentic and sovereign, and all these things are coming, which some of us are not even getting into. But this is kind of the evolution. So in this context of evolution within the digital development space, why does conversations or communities of practice like this matter? Especially in the Asian context. We are like almost 5 billion or 4.7 billion people who live in Asia, over half of the world's population. But all of us know most AI tools are built elsewhere, trained on Western data or English data, and tested in Western context. And if we don't shape how AI is used here, especially in our vulnerable communities, someone else will. And as MERL folks or researchers, or even as development professionals, not only are we best suited to shape it, but also it's a moral responsibility to make sure we are custodians of this. Because I think AI is almost blowing up like internet did. When I was doing thesis or I was doing master's research, there was no internet. We used to go to libraries, and now suddenly we don't need to go to libraries. You can access JSTOR and so on. Now AI is taking it to the next level. So are we going to be champions of that space, or are we simply going to be mute followers and then complain about if somebody else is taking over the conversations? And that's why, as MERL's professionals, we are best suited to shape it. Some of the risks, again, this is not new or rocket science. You probably have more experience facing this on the ground, especially with regards to Asia. The language models are always in English. Yes, they're beginning to use Asian and even sometimes African languages, but many languages are underrepresented. And so because of that, and you might wonder, so what's the big deal? Does language matter? Language matters. If you're working in ethnography or sociology, you understand the power that language brings to outputs and outcomes. And so it's useful to be inclusive even when you design AI tools. And then existing biases amplifies hierarchies. There is a book, I can't remember the name of the book, but it talks about how technologies, when it's pushed as a silver bullet rather than context specific, can amplify existing problems, whether it's caste or gender or intersectionalities. So, there are multiple examples of that. I'm not going to go in the interest of time, but you know that biases can sort of amplify existing socioeconomic situations or structural inequalities that exist. And then digital divide is accurate. It's just expanding more and more with more, and AI can compound that, and its use can exclude the very communities that we work on day in and day out. Again, this is Asia specific, but it's also can be applicable in Africa or Latin America and other countries. But since this is an Asia working group, it's very much relevant to us here as well. And then again, data sovereignty gaps. There are different data protection laws. Even if there are laws, they are still not really practiced. And many times the EU hosted AI tools can have real life ethical implications in sensitive populations and so on. And then most often AI can't read the room. It's the cultural context can get lost. Gender dynamics and all these things require human judgment that algorithms cannot replicate, no matter how sophisticated it may sound. Maybe it can talk to you. I mean, I was reading an article about how people are now no longer interested in going on real dates, but rather talk to an AI which only says things that they are interested in listening to and things like that. So, but an algorithm cannot replicate a life and death situation where you need to decide fast on a key situation a vulnerable community faces. And then, of course, infrastructural realities. There's connectivity issues in field settings, which means some tools may not be used exactly how they are needed. So it's a real barrier when you do field work and not just a theoretical one. And the core thing that I find missing is, because I work in both of these spaces in tech and MEL and research, I follow many of these summits, sometimes often more hype than reality. I'm not complaining, or I mean, these are good things to have, bring people together to ensure AI is governed properly and so on. Like recently, there was this AI India summit, and then there was Action Summit in Paris, and last week, or even 2 days ago, the Vienna had this panel on digital chessboard specific to Asian contexts, and then AI good for Geneva. But the gaping hole I found in all of them is there was nothing on, how do you measure this, and no accountability architectures, no evidence feedback loops, and organizations are like evaluation organizations are not represented at this table where AI governance decisions are being made. So we do need a framework for responsible AI in MEL, and that is where we have to come in as a community and represent. And we can't represent that if we don't understand the technology, if we don't understand how AI works. And it's beyond just ChatGPT and algorithms. I mean, what's the architecture? How is it used? And you can only do that firsthand when you start using it yourself as an evaluator, even as a testing mechanism. So today I'm going to give you 3 of these experiences from this UNU wider paper, UNU Macau paper that I did, and the book chapter, as well as the findings from discussions with our students. The first one is from the paper. The paper was titled Responsible AI Myth or Shared Burden, where it's about understanding the role of creators in US with the users of AI with an evaluator's lens. We often in these summits you see the word being used as responsible AI, responsible this, responsible AI, good AI, and all that. But it really puts the spotlight on AI, or on an algorithm which has no agency, no morality, and no accountability. But the real question as evaluators we should be asking, or guiding people to ask in powers that be that we sit with, is how do we make responsible creators and users of AIs? And that's where we come in with our contextual knowledge and experience working with the ones who lack voice. And so my request is to reframe this AI is not to say it's only about responsible AI, but really work with technology professionals to really make them see whether or not these systems that they design really are inclusive and not just excluding an entire population just for profit and things like that. And AI is a tool with no inherent moral discussion. Calling it responsible just simply shifts its blame to a technology. And then governance frameworks, especially in Asia where it's still emerging, this distinction to call it what it is critical. And the issue with responsible AI is oftentimes we call this shifting blame or agency attribution is, according to these academics, you can look it up later, is 3 things. One, the technical solutionism, where algorithms can solve problems. A few years ago it was blockchain, and then big data. Before that it was internet. Now it's AI. So we always think algorithms can solve ethical problems, but in reality, we all know it ignores underlying social issues. Even us as human beings, we sometimes ignore social issues because we are biased people. Just because we work in social sciences doesn't mean we are nice people. We can be full of biases, and we oftentimes, more often than not, use our biases. and let alone design the technologies that we design, they're going to amplify our biases. So it's not really a solution. And then automation, over reliance on automated systems. People are talking about, oh, these things are going to get replaced. I mean, you can't replace things that requires a human oversight, a human touch. I mean, world dynamics are not perfection, and it has dynamics that are flawed, and it requires a human oversight to see those flaws. And then diffusion of responsibility that Nissenbaum talks about, where no one feels fully accountable. You blame it on responsible AI. Maybe you're driving a car which is self-driven and it crashes, and you say, oh no, I was sleeping on the wheel. I mean, so things can happen for small tools that we develop with AI as well. So what Elish is talking about is we go to this moral crumple zones where we deflect responsibility onto AI in an already complex systems in which we work. And these are some of the case studies. Again, I'm not going to read through each of them, but about how AI use in systems are already causing biases in Chicago and Kenya and Asia, where reinforcing existing socioeconomic problems is a major cause. If you simply use AI without a moral compass or without a guiding force like evaluation tools that we use in traditional systems or traditional interventions. And I've in that paper argued of how a MERL person can be an ethical navigator, right at the technical development stage, where you look at the algorithm, what it does, and how does it translate into contextual factors, and how does community values get coded into specific projects that they may be doing at different stages of deployment of an AI tool, whether it's pre-deployment, and regular monitoring even after deployment, and then measuring this long-term impact evaluation of what is it really working, and then ensuring there's participatory governance in the design of those tools. So my argument, as Marklet is saying here, is evaluators should be central to building trust in AI and how accountability is constructed in deployment context. Again, this is just one of the phases. It's easier said than done because there's so many factors in it. But one way to do that is at the pre-deployment stage, you can map the stakeholders, assess organizational capacity for governance, and identify potential harms. And implementation monitoring is track performance for unintended consequences, very much like how you would if you're introducing, let's say, a new peanut production technology or a new skill set and so on. But all the more so for an AI tool. And then continue to have a long-term tool by systemic impacts and cascading effects, a lot of which we are not strangers to as evaluators. And then whether AI reduces or amplifies inequalities. And again, continue to monitor sustainability of benefits and social acceptance. So that's one of the ways in which we do. And this is the book chapter that I'm working on currently. I mean, book that I'm editing with my co-authors. I mean, co-editors Stefan and Kerry, who are senior professionals. And this book has about 34 chapters of case studies from around the world, from who's who in evaluation, from World Bank to MERL Tech colleagues as well have contributed a chapter. And here we are looking at the different evaluation cycles on scoping and design, document review, interviewing, geospatial analysis, qualitative coding, and dissemination. And each of them have presented case studies that they've actually deployed as practitioners, the challenges that they've had, and as a result, what is needed. And based on the failures that they have had, we've designed something. And then apart from that, we've also had this course that I mentioned to you that DevCafe hosts, where we have students from 18 plus countries, and then they have reported barriers on language limitations, data privacy anxieties, and then what they use it for. And then the example of how can they use it. So based on both the chapter examples from this book, as well as the student interactions from this course, we've collectively developed, the three of us have developed this framework where we are calling it framework for responsible AI in monitoring and evaluation, where there's fairness and accountability in its design architecture, and rigor through epistemic integrity and active stakeholder engagement, meaningful transparency. I mean, that's I think we think is important, because something is transparent doesn't automatically mean it's going to be fair. It has to be meaningful, which means it has an effect. And then finally, ethical proportionality, which covers all the 7 evaluation phases. How to do this is very hard to go in a 20-minute presentation, and book is going to be open source, so it'll be published. So hopefully Meltech colleagues will share with you. And it's not paid, it's open source. So the idea is to build capacity. So in all the 7 evaluation phases, but to do that, we just use this checklist to follow. How do you do it as an event? Let's say you are a MERL professional embedded in a program, whether it's a donor or whether it's an implementer or an NGO. How do you do it and adapt it to you, your context? So that's what that book, this checklist is going to help you with. But one way to get started on AI, if you've never used, I'm sure some of you are already using it, and some of you have still, maybe your organizational policy is not allowing you to do it. But always start small in terms of what are you going to do. Summarize a document. Maybe you have a PDF that is public information without a lot of publicly identifiable information of staff and students. If there are staff, remove those names, and then start saying, compare these 3 PDFs or something like that, very small in ChatGPT and so on. And then have a statement. Even in our book, every chapter discloses what did AI do, what did you do. So it helps you to reflect on whether it was fact checked or not. And then all AI, whether it's an advanced algorithm or not, hallucinates. It's just the nature of it, because it's just trying to give you what you want. And so validate it constantly, check for language sources, check for triangulation, especially in Asian context with limited local languages. The hallucination rates could be very high. And then keep on building your prompt library yourself, because good prompts are reusable assets. Collect and share them with your team. That's a great starting point. Have a policy for your organization. And then again, I'm saying use the frame checklist, but there are so many checklists I'm sure you yourself can develop. This frame is not a rocket science. We've just used it from case studies from that book, and also from our students. But essentially, it's really highlighting the key factors, which is epistemic integrity, accountability, engagement, and transparency and proportionality has to be there. And just like you would in any evaluation that you do or research you do, don't skip the ethics part. Ethics is not just about equity and equality. Sometimes you have to understand the oppressive nature of certain situations and such a certain context, which could really mar, because just because there's a do no harm principle doesn't mean it's going to be followed. Sometimes the language of oppression is needed, especially in the AI context, because that's what creates the barriers in the first place, which I'm sure you are well aware of. And so communities of practice like this MERL Tech one, I think it's one of a kind, and it's important because we can't work in isolation when it comes to things like AI, which are quadrupling in its development and capabilities. And it's evolving really fast. And peer learning is the most effective strategy. So we can't function in silos. One issue as MERL professionals we face is within our organization, sometimes we are seen as silos because we are like auditors. But in reality, we shape and guide how programs should develop. And so we are in the best position to shape and guide how AI as a intervention starts and programs. So please engage in this community and share your prompt libraries, discuss failures, and we can develop jointly an Asia-specific guidance together. Asian practitioners, we have these unique challenges because we are not invited to since London, Washington, DC, all these Vienna groups. And so we are sometimes people call us global South, but really we are a global majority. So we have the power as evaluators to change the discourse to what is reflecting of our realities in the ground. One thing I do want to say, it's not really a concluding thought, but with regards to the lecture or with this session, is we need to stop thinking about AI or digital as a delivery mechanism. It's not. It's gone from that stage, as I showed you in the first slide. It's really about power structures, and it really connects to the debates around sovereignty, whether it's AI or big data and so on. So we have to stop asking yourself, can we use AI in our interventions or communities? But really, the question should be about, can communities have meaningful control over AI is used on our behalf? And what are we as evaluators doing about it? All this sounds super serious, so I thought I'll close with something very simple, that how you can start, like if you've never started AI at all, and today you're going to download ChatGPT as a result of this. You, I don't know if you follow Instagram or TikTok. There's this withclair.io is a page that sort of builds AI capacity in a fun way, and then they give each of the ChatGPT or different GPTs out there or AI tools out there and compare them with how they are. And I try to adapt them to the MERL setting. So, for example, ChatGPT is an intern. So if you're starting up, you could start with an intern and do some brainstorming, first drafts of your document or TOR, and for survey prototyping and quick summaries. And then Cloud is a little bit more like a comms officer, and it does executive summary, sensitive recommendation, TOC narratives. Perplexity is like a PhD students, always fact checking, a lot of literature reviews, policy, sourced evidence, and all that. And then Gemini is more bulk documents, data analysis, Google Drive linkages, cross-referencing, and so on. But the idea is to not just to use the right prompt, but delegating the right task to the right AI tool if you're starting on it. Only then you can test and get good at it, so you can guide others to use it effectively to reflect ground reality. So start using them. But the main rules of this is if you ask the intern to check facts, you will not look very wise. So use Perplexity for verification, because ChatGPT is a master hallucinator. And if you ask a PhD nerd to write a funny joke, you will look boring, because use Claude or ChatGPT for creative and persuasive writing. And if you ask the comms officer for raw data analysis, you will wait forever, because that's not that skill set. Instead, use Gemini. Again, I don't work for any of these companies, so I'm not really promoting them, but this is based on my use on different projects around the world, which one is work. And same with Claude. If you ask the analyst and heartfelt stakeholder letter, you'll only get a spreadsheet. So use Claude when empathy and tone matters the most. So don't just prompt, delegate. And so let me just call you to shape our AI and how AI serves evaluation in Asia together. I'll put some links for e-course if you're interested. It's really subsidized because we are building capacity. We are not trying to make any money out of that, but we really want to build this capacity of AI in AI in MERL. And please do join the MERL Asia working group to be partners in this process of shaping how AI takes place in Asia and globally. With that, I'll hand over back to our colleagues in MERL.
Wow. Thank you so much, Val. That was like a whirlwind 20-minute tour of the world of AI. And I count myself among AI users, but I have to admit, I learned so much from what you've said. I'll probably have to come back and revisit this conversation to pick up on some of the things that I heard today. But a brief summary that does not do justice. I already know that you talked to us about the particular issues relating to AI in the context of Asia. So there's issues around language and the representation of people and cultures within those languages, the laws relating to AI and AI regulations, the cultural context that AI misses that applies to our region, the lack of MEL frameworks, and what each of us can do on that front. I think what I found especially mind-boggling was what you addressed as moral crumple zones. I don't think that's a concept I've heard before, and that is definitely going to be something that I've pinned for further reading. I like the framework that you set out because it's simple and of course it's based on common sense, but also experiences and case studies that you pull together. So personally, I'm also waiting for that book to release and would love to delve deeper into it. And then the tips for starting, if you know, for beginners who are beginning to look into AI, it's not something that's going away. So I know I have encountered folks who are too scared to experiment and think that AI will take over our jobs and we will not be able to like what's the future like, etc. But AI is here to stay with its goods and its potentials, but also with the weaknesses and disadvantages. And therefore, I especially appreciated your power structure message, Val, where you spoke about don't look at it as a delivery mechanism anymore. It is actually a power structure. I think subconsciously I may have known that, but seeing it in writing on a slide just brought it home to me in a very strong way. Uh, so that, in summary, was a very thought-provoking presentation, Val. I know there have been questions coming in. Barbara, do we have questions to start off with? Otherwise, I can kick off. But if we have questions already, let's get started to optimize time people have with Val.
So we have a question from Orepatile. So they ask, with the understanding that the direction for development in China and Asia is rapidly moving automation and robotics, how will Asia manage the human side of the transition? So big question for Val. And folks, if you want to come off mute and ask questions, you're more than welcome to. Just use the hand raising function and we can direct the questions. But yeah, the first one would be that. So how can Asia manage the human side of that transition?
I mean, it's a presentation in itself, but it's a very good question. I mean, the scale of transformation is it's immense now. Like if you talk about robotics, 74% of all AI robots or AI powered robots have been from Asia, and especially in 2024, I think about 574,000 units were installed. I mean, there is this Futures Institute in Edinburgh, which we partner with sometimes, and this figures, China alone represented about 54% of these installations. So there is this displacement creation paradox that happens. The World Bank had a report on East Asia Pacific analysis on robot adoption in five, or AI adoption in five ASEAN countries to create jobs. It's supposed to have created 2 million skilled formal workers between 2018 and 2022, but simultaneously displaced 101.4 million low-skilled formal workers. So there is this challenge of when you have this transformational change happening technology, the human being, if they are not catching up, can get left behind. But what does it mean as evaluators from an evaluation perspective? Which means the social protection is lagging behind in industrial policy. That's not unique. It's just always there, but it's just compounding more. And that is why we need as evaluators to be champions of this, governances and AI governance policies, whether at a country level or company level. And I saw someone from GSMA. GSMA does some workshops on how do we use evaluation skills and apply it to mobile transformations or mobile data use. They've been doing it even for big data. And then reskilling program that we have is very weak. I mean, as evaluators, we still stick to some white dude created methodologies and theory based evaluations. But here this really calls for reframing of how we approach evaluation, especially in the Asian context, and so that the intersectionalities and the vulnerabilities are not left behind. We are not having those conversations. That's kind of what my challenge is. So yes, your question is right. I mean, how can we face it? It's something we have to collectively do by representing the voices that we work for in these forums and get fully aware of what technological changes is happening. I'm not saying go and start reading how to do algorithms or start doing programming skills. No, you don't need to be a technology expert to understand. Oftentimes, we see as social scientists or as MERL professionals, we are not scientists. Actually, it's very difficult to work in social sciences than in any rocket science or anything, in my experience, because you can teach a chimpanzee to code, but understanding the nuances that happens in the field that is unique, that only comes from constantly observing field realities, is where our strength lies. And that's what we should represent in the conferences, in the dialogues, in the frameworks that we govern. I hope that answers your question. I mean, it is a very big discussion. You can have a workshop panel on itself, but for now, I think that is a starting point: is get knowing what's happening, what changes, and see what challenges are happening as a result of that, and use your skills as an evaluator to build that gap. I hope that answers your question.
If I may follow up, Val, while other questions are coming in, I'm struck by what you said about using methods and data and coming up with our own as necessary. I think given some of the strong focus in evaluations, murky past where quantitative research or, the whole scientific rigor was used as a lens or as a method and methodology or as a perspective even, where anything that was qualitative was frowned upon because it wasn't rigorous or robust enough because we defined rigorous and robust in a particular way. It appears so that was one junction in research and evaluation. I feel like now we are stepping into another juncture where everything, if it's machine led in some way or the other, then we are probably not optimizing other more qualitative methods that we might have or more traditional methods. Many countries already had, long before evaluation became a thing, many countries already had ways of trying to understand whether how governments function, how do things come together, etc. Right? Have you seen any good examples that you could talk to us about using some of these creative methodologies and also combining them or integrating them with AI to either gather data or to process data? Any such examples that come to mind within the Asian context?
That's a good question. Even AI development is purely quantitative. So the benchmarks they're setting to measure is also very quantitative. But I would say or argue that that is where the qualitative research has or the potential to have greatest impacts, because oftentimes these models ignore qualitative phenomena.
Right.
Like a few years ago, the blockchain was a big push for using blockchain in land records. It may work in a country like Georgia, for example, because land records are feasible, reasonable, and so on. But in a country like India, if you start putting land data in a blockchain which is unimmutable, sort of a ledger. Uh, there was a scheme that I used to work with like 20 years ago when I was doing research. It was called Indrama scheme. I don't know if it's known now. It was to give like underprivileged communities land access, but oftentimes that land in name was in somebody else's, I mean the vulnerable
Mm,
person, but the person who occupying usually was an elitist of that community. And if you make that in a what do you call so you really didn't control the land documents at all. And if you try to put that in a blockchain, you're not going to make the record clean and neat, but you're basically amplifying and making it permanent, the
right.
social structures. And the same applies to AI. Like let's say you're using AI to detect payment of delivery based goods to farmers, and then the payment had a big corruption scandal happening. You're simply automating the process and making corruption efficient if you don't code in checks to see what was the social issue that was caused. And so I can't think of so many examples at the moment that comes from my mind, because it's still under development stages and frameworks are still being formed. But the examples that I cited, whether it's targeting of specific populations by the Chicago police or this lending mechanism, I don't want to take the name of the organization, that came out in the news recently in Indonesia, where the AI was used to make payments, but in reality, it was only paying what was pre-programmed to pay to a certain groups of people, and so on. So that is why you need to have those checks and balances and frameworks that consider this at the algorithm or pre-deployment stage. So that is what I would say as a short answer. Yes, qualitative research is all the more important, and qualitative methods, especially complexity aware monitoring tools that we use, whether
Right.
it's developmental evaluation or outcomes harvesting, you need to see what the tool is and what's the context, and then use the right AI, I mean evaluation tool, just like you would in any other intervention that you're about to evaluate.
Yeah. Thank you, Val. I'll turn you back over to Barbara because I know there are other questions that have come in. Barbara, back to you.
Yeah, that's okay. So many questions. So I'll share the two or three questions that I've seen in the chat, and then maybe Val, you can address them all. So the first one is from Melody. They ask, what advice do you have for organizations and vulnerable populations who may be affected by AI, but who may not necessarily have capacity or financial support to use any of these tools? So that's one. And then the second one from Sarah is she's asking about the AI Impact Summit in Delhi. And many folks there talked about how evaluation methods need to be totally overhauled by AI for AI, and that RCTs are way too slow, that they can keep up with model change, etc. So, yeah, just a question about your response to some of those statements, and then there are a couple more questions, but I think I'll share those two first, and then we can come back. Otherwise, you're gonna be talking
Sure.
for way too long.
I think Melody raises a very important point. Many times these AI tools are deployed by big organizations and they can afford these licenses and so on. Even if you buy a basic pro license for ChatGPT, it's like $50. It might be small for a big organization, but for smaller organizations, it's really insane. And that's why communities of practice like this are useful. There are, I don't know if you've heard of TechSoup. TechSoup is a organization that supports NGOs who are willing to use and test tools, and it's a nonprofit organization. And Development Cafe, we try to give subsidies to NGOs, especially in the global majority and things like that. But ultimately, it's an investment you may have to make. Many times, organizations like Anthropic and others are trying to see if they can be subsidized for nonprofits. Like DevCafe uses Google Tools a lot, and you have a nonprofit license, which is practically zero to almost nothing at all. And even Canva, for example, is a tool. If you have a nonprofit status foundation, you can get it for free. What is missing is sometimes we don't know that these things exist specifically for specific tools. Like even Google is free for up to 50 users, completely the workspace. But many times I go and do these trainings for non-NGOs, they don't know that. They end up paying $5 per user, even though it's totally free for nonprofits. So like that, I think is how we have to approach that, from communities of practice or scholarships from other agencies and so on. Google has a summer sponsors program where they come and design your own tool. The interesting thing about things like ChatGPT is you can have your own organizational ChatGPT by adapting it. And for that, this Google summer programs, they help programmers to come to your NGO and support. Try to reach out to people. Most of this information is online, and so we can, and if you are specifically looking for help for someone, you can write to us and we will try to connect you with our contacts in the tech industry. I see next question is from Sarah Chamberlain. She says, thank you very much. AI impacts entirely who don't know about evaluation methods need to be totally overhauled for AI RCTs. To the many folks, I don't know what to respond to the AI Impact Summit in Delhi. It was in the news for all the wrong reasons. But my only thought is, I think there should have been a section on how do you measure AI tools. It was more of showcasing of, hey, look at the shiny guns and objects we have. It was a great event. A lot of colleagues from ADB were there. Some of my friends were there, and it's a really great event. It's not easy to organize an event of that scale, and it's nice that an Asian country is leading such spaces. But yes, I was a bit disappointed there was nothing on how do you measure these things and how do you see how it translates it. So if somebody would were to ask me what should be missing in the next AI Impact Summit, I think there should be a section on how do you determine what is good, how do you measure the impact, how do you shape it. One of the things like developmental evaluation does is it's not just a linear program approach. No? It constantly does. If any of you have ever worked in software programming, we do something called Scrum cycles, SCRUM, where we test the iterations of how does the user benefit or affect from it. And the same kind of cycles we need to adapt in evaluation of AI as well. Like we deploy it and see what happens, who gets left behind, who is benefiting, and whose value systems are enforced and reinforced, and so on. So I think that is something we need to do. RCTs may be good. I mean, I'm not a big fan personally of RCTs. I mean, although I've done a lot of RCTs around in my career, but I always think that they are good for like structured programs. Like you have a big agriculture program, something, and you want to measure, experimental control groups, fine. But AI is a complex intervention, so you need to be more understanding of the multiple pathways that it can determine. Okay, and then there's Dilshad is working in ID Insight AI ethics when it comes to what is it? I can't see. IRB. Okay, most research ethics. Again, ethics tend to focus on equity and equality and rarely on oppression. I mean, if I start talking about oppression, people, especially my colleagues in the US, think I'm a left wing or liberal or something. I've never heard of these words before when I started my career. In Asia, we don't think of these things as left wing or Asian. To care for another human beings is normal for us. It's not left wing, libtard, or whatever they call it these days in modern discussions. For me, oppression is a real thing. Some people are oppressed, and especially when you use technology, these structural oppressions will show their ugly face, unfortunately. So ethics has to go beyond do no harms. And let me see if I can find this. There's an article that was written by a person from Future Institute. It's called Six Ethics Principles for AI. And there they're talking about how we are able to we run AI using these six principles. One of them is constantly understanding how people will be oppressed as a result of that, and only then you can really be ethical. You're simply talking about equity and equality. Even if you talk about, let's say, these positive reinforcements like reservations and so on, there's somebody's going to be left behind or somebody's going to be benefiting. But if you really look at problems and barriers that cause those inequalities in the first place, then you're able to make a responsible AI or responsible users of AI in the first in the I mean to begin with. And what else we have to do? Primarily qualitative uh, analysis, still maybe cross field exchange. Yes, that's these kind of COPs are, especially the one Meltech is hosting, is where we could do that. No, we can learn from each other, not just success stories but also failures. And that's why consensus is useful, and we come together as professionals, share our knowledge. Just because I'm talking on AI from MERL, from my experience, doesn't mean I know everything. I'm sure if you start talking, I'll learn a lot more than what you have in the field, because the perspectives that I have may be very different from perspectives you have, and when both of us come together, we have new ways to create it, and that's why I think this COP is useful.
I see a couple of hands raised from Melody and Myra. I don't know who raised their
Oh,
hand
sorry, I can't see
first,
the
but
answers. I'm reading
maybe
the chats.
Melody and then
Yeah.
Myra.
Thank you. No worries. I just want to follow up with the response. Thank you so much. It's a really inspirational presentation. Just in terms of ethics, like I understand there are these schemes. I'm just thinking like where the power balances, because like it could run the if there are no sort of safeguards in place, it could run the risk of, for instance, in the 90s or 2000s, where like you had a lot of drug companies going into developing countries to test their products, and like
Mhm.
would like if we don't build in safeguards, like that could be a possible scenario for a lot of these vulnerable populations where maybe there's an incentive, but then like what is the cost of that? So I was just wondering, how is there a way to kind of like balance to be ethical and be involved and inclusive, but at the same time make sure that they don't become kind of sacrificed for like capital gains?
I think it's a very valid point, especially, I do a lot of work with private sector, and oftentimes innovation can be constrained by ethics. And that's not a wrong statement at all, because change is the only constant, as we know, and oftentimes the speed at which innovation happens is not their time for, looking for every side and going, it goes like a bullet. But that's where we come in, right? So we can filter out. We can't really stop the speed at which things go. Blockchain was initially started as a way for illegal trafficking, pedophiles to pay, and drug sales and so on. It's only when people started realizing, no, blockchain actually has good ways to use it, then people started coming in and adding ethics and all. So technology cannot be filtered, and we are just like mechanisms to slow down, rather filter out, so people are not benefited. So I don't think there's a question of one not contributing to the other. It's really about having that balance. I once saw this accountability and learning. Sometimes in MERL, we are supposed to, the donors tell us, go evaluate is this. There's little less of learning and more of accountability that happens. We're just doing a checklist rather than learning from it. So I'm not saying you should keep a check at every step of the technology development process. That's simply not possible. I mean, how can you match with Mark Zuckerbergs of the world and Elon Musk's of the world sitting in an NGO in Delhi or somewhere? It's not possible. But what we can do in our zone of influence, which may be small, which may be big, which may be regional, we can make sure that the effect of that technology, however powerful it is not excluding someone. That's all we can do, realistically. I mean, I'm not going to be able to call, Elon Musk and change his views on USAID, for example, and he already closed it. And so how do we change people like that who have the power to control systems? It's only in our zone of influence. And that is why we need to form consensus with people who have and expand our zones of influence. So please don't think that I'm trying to put marks on innovation. And I work a lot in private sector, and so I understand exactly what you're asking. So don't worry. So we
Thank
can only
you.
do zones of influence with our little ethics and all that. But if we don't do that and we completely let technology overrun us, and there's no stop to it, it's then we need to have filters in society with regards to tech or other interventions.
Right. We're already a little bit over time, but I do want to make sure that Myra gets to ask her question. So maybe Myra, if you can quickly ask, and then Val can quickly respond, and we can wrap up. We can't hear you. You're on
Yeah,
mute.
I'm gonna quick. Hi, Sir Val. Sir Val is supervisor in Dove Cafe. I'm asking as a as a colleague. Now, I think my question is also related to ethics a little bit, because I see that AI had been all over Facebook and advertising itself for us to enroll with. And then because the marketing says the future is AI in the world. So I'm just a little bit apprehensive, though, of using AI, most especially on research and mail, because I still believe the human capacity and way of thinking and producing sentences. But then, on a second thought, all I will do if I do research is just compile everything else from the computer. And what if ChatGPT will just do it for me easily? So, and I also hear my colleagues who are enrolled in the doctoral degrees, that their professors are actually advising them to download Gemini, Perplexity, and Rock for their researches. And I mean, for me, it's just so unfair. I am proud to have my dissertation done 10 years ago with zero AI, and I'm very proud of it. But now I'm seeing that graduating students are so easy to graduate doctoral degrees because of AI. So what I'm saying here is just that for my sanity, that today's world, is it okay really to use AI, and I'm safe to assume that AI is allowed in research, and like reports we do to donor companies, for example, in World Bank, for example, ADB or whatever, to submit an AI generated report, and I should not be ashamed of it. And by the way, there's also an AI tool that can translate your AI generated report to a human way of writing it, but it's also AI. Just for it that not to sound an AI generated one. So just for my sanity, because I'm getting crazy over this. Over, Sir Val.
Sure, it depends what you mean by AI generated report. It reminds me of this quote by this lady called Joanna, who's an author. Uh, she says, I want AI to do my laundry and dishes so that I can do art and writing, not for AI to do my art and writing so that I can do my laundry and dishes. So I think you need to decide what you want AI to do, right? You are still the author of that report. You can use AI to do the basic things like laundry and dishes, so you keep your creative thing alive. But if you're completely saying that someone is doing the entire research in PhD or whatever in AI, how is that person? I wouldn't trust that person to do my laundry also. So it's not, you still have to be the person who is thinking, and you can, AI is an algorithm. It's like a smart assistant or a smart student. And if you hand over your life, and like some people are like handing over their dating profile to AIs, I mean, it says more about them than rather than about AI. So I wouldn't say that a AI generated report is something trustable. Maybe someday it might be, but even then, I think it should only be a tool that we use, and I hope it remains just a tool. And it depends on company to company. Sometimes different organizations have policies on what you can use AI for and how do you use it for. It's not very mature. It's starting to be developed because people are realizing AI is here to stay. But in reality, if you just use it to summarize something, but then again doing the double check for hallucinations, you are people say talk about human in the loop. You should be the only person in the loop. AI is simply a tool. So there's not like AI is taking over and you suddenly come in and give a little bit of things. The quote is from Joanna Macijuska. Apologies, I can't pronounce her name. I think it's a Polish surname.
Thank you, Sir
So
Val.
does that answer your question? So there is no AI generated report. You should be the one guiding it. You can do like laundry and dishes, like minor tasks for AI and even analysis and coding and so on. But in reality, you should be the author of the report with support from AI. Is my request. It's not a demand or anything.
Okay, I think with that, we have gone past time, several minutes past time. Val, deeply appreciate your presence here, but also your willingness to stay late with us. It's been a very interesting conversation. I think I will just, for the rest of the community, say that in terms of next, I mean, thank you for joining us today and listening to Val and coming up with your questions and ideas. Sorry we didn't have longer, but part of the idea of having a structured 1 hour session is to be respectful of the time of the speaker, but also each of you as you go about your daily routines, right? So sparing 1 hour over coffee or taking a break is probably more feasible than a 2 hour lengthy conversation, despite the fact that it would be an interesting conversation. So, in order to wrap up, I just wanted to mention some of the next steps that we are going to be taking here. One is please be on the lookout for other events. We hope to do one event per quarter. So please be on the lookout for those and do join those events and also circulate in your networks with others who might be interested now that you've attended the first one. We will be sharing the recording and the write-up of this conversation probably by tomorrow. And Barbara will be sharing the link, I think, where you all can, she'll share that in the chat so you all can keep up with the conversations, with the newsletters. As I mentioned earlier, please do sign up for those. The MERL team really produces some interesting newsletters on the use of AI. They sum up conversations that are going on across the world, etc. So please do sign up. It's a quick and easy way of keeping up in the world of AI. As Val said, we can't do that as individuals. It's too hard. And MERL does some part of that job for us. And so I'm deeply grateful for their efforts. With that, we will close. Thank you so much, Val. Thank you again for staying with us. It has been a fabulous start to what I hope will be a very active community. And we look forward to welcoming you again to talk about the many other things that you can talk about in terms of AI and MERL. So look forward to bringing you back at some stage, but do join us in between whenever you can as well. We look forward to seeing you there. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening, and we'll be back in touch.
Thank
Bye.
you very much.